the Identity Maze, where we explore the paradox of human connection in the global age. I'm Eva Dana. Let's step into the maze. What if intelligence isn't enough to find truth? What if the real difference is how we interpret reality itself? Our social media voice reflects our beliefs, and many of us hold the view that our beliefs are shaped by what we hear and see. So our social media voice is directly associated with our physical reality, or what our body is aware of. But what if some of our beliefs are not derived from what we hear and see? This could make things more complicated. We would have to ask ourselves, where do these other beliefs come from? Think about it for a moment. Have you ever felt certain about something without fully knowing why? Almost as though the belief appeared before the reasoning did. Does this mean there is another side to us? And does our social media voice reflect more than what we hear and see? Let's take a step into one aspect of the unseen side of belief. Do you believe that we are born with a moral compass? Or do you believe that our sense of right and wrong is the result of what we hear and see over the course of our lifetime? Some of us believe that we are born with a conscience, and this is our innate moral compass. It provides us with a foundational and natural morality that allows us to distinguish between right or wrong, or basic proper and improper behavior. Some of us believe our conscience is formed through our upbringing, education, cultural conditioning, and social interaction. So we are not born with it, it develops as we grow. And there are some of us who believe we are born with a conscience that has some innate predispositions, but over time, these get shaped by environmental experiences. But irrespective of which of these beliefs you hold, one thing is true for all of them. Our conscience is not a physical thing. We can't see it or touch it. Yet, this non-physical component of our composition is essential to all of us, because without it we lack a sense of right and wrong. And the experts say those who lack a conscience have a serious mental health dysfunction. It's a little like gravity. We can't see gravity itself, but we constantly observe its effects. Our conscience isn't the only thing that is part of who we are, which we cannot see or touch. We have quite a few non-physical components, and when we put them together, we can say they provide us with the non-physical side of our biological architecture. Try viewing this as we do our physical biological architecture, which consists of our body and its various physical components. Our non-physical architecture isn't just a nice-to-have extra layer. We need it. Without it, we are not human beings, which makes it a vital bedrock of us individually and collectively. For example, you can hold a human brain in your hands during surgery, but you cannot physically point to someone's love, grief, or sense of meaning. And although there are many components that make up our non-physical architecture, there is an aspect of it that we could view in the same way as we do our body. Without it, the other non-physical components are useless to us. Any ideas? Well, this is exactly where belief begins to diverge, even among intelligent people, because people interpret this essential aspect or force differently. Some people describe it as the essence of life. Others refer to it as the life force. Some say it's the spirit within us, and some don't acknowledge it at all. And maybe that's why two intelligent people can look at the same human experience and walk away with completely different conclusions about reality. But one thing I think we can all agree on is life is a gift, it's not a given. Now, just suppose for a moment that there is this force of nature that is essential and foundational to us all as human beings. Do you believe we all should know something about it? Or is it your belief that it's really not that big a deal, you just don't care? Now, there's a real possibility that some of you listening will hold one belief, and some of you will hold another. And this highlights our first, and perhaps the biggest roadblock that faces us when we think of our unseen side, and that is it's unlikely we will ever all agree. We look to science for knowledge about ourselves. And while biology is brilliant at detailing our physical side right down to the cellular level, it is limited when it comes to our non-physical side. The moment you pivot to things you can't see, weigh, or measure, you slam into a knowledge gap. Biology relies on the scientific method, and the scientific method is rigorous. It demands empirical, repeatable data, things you can see and things you can measure. If you can't isolate it in a lab or see its effect on a gauge, the traditional scientific tools simply cannot provide us with information about it. Science gives us powerful tools, but like any system, it also has boundaries. And when different people try to fill that gap, they don't always arrive at the same conclusions. And when we don't have clear answers, belief starts to fill the space. The less we know, the more confidently we can believe. Beliefs are like lenses. Once you're looking through them, everything starts to make sense, even when it shouldn't. It's like wearing tinted glasses for so long, you eventually forget the tinted lens is there. We don't just believe what we see, we begin to see what we believe. If our non-physical side is an important part of who we are, then it stands to reason that we can't just focus on the physical stuff we can measure. What is even more fascinating is that the interrelated components of our non-physical architecture, like the mind and consciousness, experts say, are responsible for influencing the human experience. This suggests that these unseen parts of us also shape our opinions and beliefs. So, it is fair to say our social media voice not only reflects what we see and hear, it reflects our unseen side too. Now, some of you may be saying, hold on, science does study consciousness and the mind. And you're right, it does. But it often defines them through brain activity and measurable outputs. But are they more than that? Now ask yourself honestly, have you ever had a thought, feeling, or instinct that felt deeply real, even though you couldn't fully explain it? This is yet another example of how intelligent people can look at the same question and reach very different answers. And we see this time and time again in everyday life, when people explain the same experience in completely different ways. Now, imagine if the brain is a conduit, a biological passage that acts as a meeting point between our physical and non-physical architecture, almost like a radio receiver, translating signals into something we can consciously experience. We could then see the brain as the place where the physical and non-physical meet. And when they do, they exchange information or commands. In such a scenario, we could say the brain manages the interactions, but it does not define the human experience. So what defines the human experience? Well, our physical architecture through our sensory organs is one way. We know that. But there is no guarantee this is the only way, which means there's a possibility that our non-physical architecture plays a role too. We will discuss this in more detail in future episodes, so be sure to follow each week. If our unseen side plays a role in how we define the human experience, and science does not provide us with sufficient information on our unseen side, where do we go to find out more information about it and what it does? This is a difficult question to answer, and this is where we have to stop and ask a critical question. If we all have a life force and an unseen side, then the information describing it has to be universally relevant, regardless of where it is. Would you agree? So if that information is contained within ancient texts, or what is now labeled as religious writings, can we just ignore it? Well, there's no doubt that we can. We can, because we are free to choose the information we pay attention to. Most of us do this already. We scroll past information the moment it feels uncomfortable, even before we fully understand it. On the other hand, perhaps we shouldn't ignore it. But for those of us who aren't religious, that will require us to look beyond the religious sphere and try to filter and extract structural knowledge rather than adopt a theology. It is important that we are cognizant that our beliefs are often regulated. They can be manipulated by labels, as well as how information is packaged. So we may have to go outside our comfort zone in order to challenge our existing beliefs. Science and the smart people who make up the scientific community present observable and measurable facts as the truth. But we have to ask ourselves, are observable and measurable facts the only criteria for truth? Because if we only accepted things we could personally verify, how many things in everyday life would completely collapse? Now consider the rising sun. For centuries, direct sensory proof told us the earth was the center of everything, because we saw the sun move. But we now know that the sun rising is an illusion caused by the earth's rotation. Yet, if we rely on what we see, we accept the illusion as truth. Even today, our eyes can be fooled by edited videos, AI-generated voices, and manipulated images online, which means perception alone is no longer enough. This highlights why using observation as our only measure of fact can be problematic, and it is a powerful lesson, especially in today's world of technology, where anything and everything can be distorted, and misinformation and disinformation spreads like wildfire. This isn't about rejecting scientific models, but rather understanding how knowledge is formed and where its limits might be. Now, let's turn our attention to the foundational models of the universe. There are two key beliefs: creation or evolution. Creation stems from a religious steer, and evolution revolves around the scientific framework. So, let's consider the Big Bang. Is it based on fact or speculation? Well, according to the scientific method's own rule, the theory requires an initial singularity, the very beginning, and by definition, that initial point is beyond space and time as we know them. It is therefore fundamentally unobservable and unmeasurable. If science insists a fact must be observable, measurable, and repeatable, then this theory, starting with an unobservable point, relies on models and interpretation rather than direct observation. This doesn't make the theory meaningless. It simply reminds us that interpretation exists even within systems we deeply trust, which leaves us pondering the question: can interpretive and speculative information about our unseen side be overlooked when we don't always apply the same standard to core scientific theories? And perhaps this is the deeper reason why intelligent people believe different things. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they sometimes work with different frameworks of understanding. So what do we do with all of this? Well, one thing we can take away from all of this is we shouldn't let one discipline dominate our beliefs or our understanding of reality. We must be willing to challenge the assumptions we've let slide, and we may need to reserve our judgment of information solely based on its originating source, because the goal is not to just hold beliefs, but to understand where they come from. Because beliefs can quietly become rooms we live in without us ever noticing the walls. Our beliefs can be manipulated, so we must approach everything with one filter. Does this information further my knowledge about myself, others, and the natural world? Because the danger isn't believing something. The real danger is never questioning why you believe it. Because the most dangerous belief is the one we never question. Welcome to the Identity Maze. This is the Identity Maze, hosted by Ava Dana. Thanks for listening. If this conversation made you think a little differently, share it with someone. If you enjoyed the episode, follow the show and join us next time. New episodes explore how beliefs form, how tribes emerge, and why changing our minds can be one of the hardest things we ever do.